Okay, I know Tyler's ready. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. We need to get some paperwork in order so that hopefully the rest of the day will go smoothly. I'd like to welcome you here and also welcome back Pastor John Fetty of the New Life Assembly of God, who is retired Marine Corps and former member of our Veterans Affairs Department and quite a leader and giver. He will be praying for us and over and with us today, and we have 2 pages of the day leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Tyler Aaron from Summit and Allison Dury from the great city of Bristol, South Dakota.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we come to you again because, Lord, we know that you are the giver of all that is good and perfect. And Lord, we need help today. To conduct the affairs set before us, we need your ability and wisdom in our hearts and minds. Lord, we ask for the people here in this chamber, in the audience today, too. Lord, that you be with them and their families. And Father, we also ask that you be with our military and grant them safety, grant their leaders wisdom. And Lord, we will look forward to the answers to our prayers. For this I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary, call the roll, please.
Senator Boland, Kamak, Cronin, Kurd, Ewing, Frerichs, Greenfield, Haverly, Heiner, Jensen, Kennedy, Killer, Klum, Colbeck, Langer, Maher, Monroe, Nelson, Neseba, Netherton, Northrup, Otten, Partridge, Peters, Rush, Russell, Soholt, Solano, Stalzer, Sutton, Tapio, Tiedemann, White, Wick, and Youngberg. We have a quorum, Mr. President.
Approval of the journal.
The Committee on Legislative Procedure respectfully reports that the Secretary of the Senate has had under consideration the Senate Journal of the 18th day. All errors, typographical or otherwise, are duly marked in the temporary journal for correction, and we hereby move the adoption of the report. Senator Greenfield, Chair.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. We're going to pause here and thank you all for being here in your state capitol and especially choosing coming to the Senate. We know that you had another choice and you're the wiser of the two. Also want to thank South Dakota Public Broadcasting and the great team that we have here. A lot of them are sort of the silent heroes, from our technician people right here and everybody able to watch this and interact with us. We really appreciate that. So some introductions from here for the people that are actually here with us. I'd like to start out with Dr. Castellanos. Doctor, thank you for being here. We have doctors of the day who come and volunteer their time here, and it's very important, and it's been done for many years through the South Dakota Medical Association, and doctors' partners then fill in for her when she's back, when she's here. And Dr. Castellanos is an obstetrics gynecology physician, God bless you, in Huron. And she actually started that wellness center, the Women's Wellness Center there in Huron, and also is chief of the medical staff this year, I understand, which is an incredible leadership role for anybody, but I know that you've modeled that for a lot of individuals through medical school and osteopathy school. So thank you for taking care of us. And on behalf of Senator White, thank you for being here, for what you do for the Huron community. On behalf of Senator Greenfield, we have the Willow Lake Senior Government class. Willow Lake, are you here? Are they here? Please stand up. Thanks. Thanks so much. Good to see you. Thanks. And how about on behalf of Senator Cronin, Gettysburg Senior Class in 8th grade? Gettysburg, thank you. It's good to see you. Thank you so much. Senator, on behalf of Senator Killer, we have the Kadoka Area High School. Is that right? Is Kadoka here yet? Okay. We'll get that in a second. McCook Central senior government class and Mr. Lyon, on behalf of Senator Nelson. McCook, please stand. Thank you so much. Caitlin's back. Caitlin's back. Just a second. Hi. Hi. Good to see you. Were you waving at me? Hi. It's so good to see you, Senator Colbeck. Caitlin, welcome back. She was a page, so we all miss you already. Senator Colbeck, you wanted to say something?
Personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I'd just like to introduce with the McCook Central Government class my beautiful niece up there in the middle, Leslie Colbeck.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey. That's beautiful. Say, Leslie, in case you need some help, Uncle Jack just mentioned 529 plan for college, and he'll contribute. That's how much he loves you. You told me that earlier today. Yeah, I mean, he's just a giver. He really is. We have Missouri River Energy Services. Thank you for lunch. Anybody from Missouri River here? Okay, we thank you anyway. Thank you on behalf of Senator Frerichs and all of us to the South Dakota Association of Towns and Townships. Thank you so much for the ice cream and for all the naps that will occur this afternoon as a result of the ice cream. SDSU ice cream, by the way, Town and Townships Association, always good to be with you. How about the second South Dakota School Age Care Alliance? They were all downstairs. Did we see any of those individuals here to recognize? We thank you. That was really a great information that you provided for us. And I think that that's it on just the general schools. But we also have today individuals who have been doing shadowing. And would all our shadows stand up from DECA and FBLA and FCLA and all of the alphabets? Just so everyone understands, ever since I was in the legislature when Tyrannosaurus Rex roamed the earth, just a second, hold it. There's something coming in from Senator White. What is it? Oh, wow, I won. I can't tell you about it, though. It's good to see you all in leadership roles. These individuals in the organizations of DECA, FBLA, FCCLA, FFA, Skills USA. The governor and I are so appreciative of the leadership that you have, but most importantly, the individuals that are leading you as well so that you can come in your respective roles and mentor as well as be part of these shadows today. So we're grateful for you being here. Thank you so much. Speaking of mentors, again, as a number of people know, this is my last time up here this next few weeks, presiding in the entire legislature, but one of my first teachers was in my Commerce Committee, and he's here. Claire Conold, Representative Conold. Claire, please stand up and let us thank you for your service. Also, we have David Scott. Representative David Scott, stand up there, brother. Where is he? He's hanging behind the pole. I thought you were. I saw you down there. Way to go, Dave! Senator Greenfield, personal privilege granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to introduce Representative Dave Scott. Okay. You beat me to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, his brother, Dave Scott. And his other brother, Larry, or something. It's Daryl. I'm sorry, Daryl. Sure, we would get it. Any other personal privileges? Okay, thank you so much. And again, welcome to the Senate. We know that you may have to make an alternative choice and go over to the House. Great place to be. But we do have some business to do. We'll talk a little about that, especially for the students. And we will go through some process right now. A lot of what we're doing now is required under our Constitution because people would be up there keeping track of the activity by pencil and paper or pen and paper, and now all of that is in computer, but we must still comply with this. So it was very open. It has always been open, contrary to popular belief, but it's even more so with our computers for the activities that took place. Now we're going to hear what happened in committees today, and our secretary will read that.
The Committee on Transportation reports that it had under consideration House Bill 1008, recommends do pass, and House Bill 1113, recommends do pass, to be placed on the consent calendar. Senator Otten, Chair. Committee on Commerce and Energy reports that it has had under consideration Senate Bill 169, recommends do pass, and recommends deferring Senate Bill 195 to the 41st legislative day. Senator Jensen, Chair. Committee on Local Government has had under consideration Senate Bills 158 and 192, and recommends deferring them to the 41st legislative day. Senator Langer, Chair. Committee on Taxation has had under consideration House Bills 1076 and 1143, recommending do pass. Senator Monroe, Chair. The Committee on Health and Human Services has had under consideration Senate Bills 176 and 207, and recommends deferring those to the 41st legislative day, and recommends tabling Senate Bills 122 and 123. Senator Sohold, Chair. And the Committee on State Affairs has had under consideration Senate Bill 125, 128, and 173, recommends do pass, recommends passing Senate Bill 172 as amended, and recommends deferring to the 41st legislative day Senate Joint Resolution 6 and Senate Bill 129, and recommends tabling Senate Bill 116. Senator Ewing, Chair.
So Secretary Johnson was just indicating what the committees did. Again, there's a lot of words in there, but they're on the computer already as to what happened in those committee hearings today. This is messages a lot of times, what the House did or what the governor's been doing, again, orally. Messages, please.
Mr. President, I have the honor to return SCR 11, in which the House has concurred, and I have the honor to transmit House Bills 1136, 1249, 1165, 1172, and 1176, which have passed the House, and your favorable consideration is requested. Sandra J. Zinter, Chief Clerk.
Next order of business is motions and resolution.
Senator Curd moves that Senate Bill 24 be deferred until Tuesday, February 13th, the 22nd legislative day.
All those in favor of deferral signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Senator Curd moves that when we adjourn today, we adjourn to convene at 1 p.m. on Thursday, February 8th, the 20th legislative day.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Now we'll have consideration of committee reports.
Senator Curd moves that the reports of the Standing Committee on Education on Senate Bills 148 and 83 be adopted.
All those in favor of adoption signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Like in the United States Senate, under our Constitution, there are certain appointments that the executive makes, or it could be the Attorney General or the Chief Justice, that the people have the ability to agree or disagree with. In this case, it's the Senate can advise and consent, so it's called a confirmation of appointment. We have a few of those today. This one is subject to discussion, and so now we'll go on to the consideration of executive appointment of Marianne Boyd. Please proceed.
The Senate proceeds to the consideration of the executive reappointment of Marianne Boyd of Yankton to the Game Fish and Parks Commission.
Any remarks? Senator Kamak, good afternoon, sir. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I rise today in support of consent for the reappointment of Marianne Boyd of Yankton, South Dakota to the Game Fish and Parks Commission. The Game Fish and Parks Commission serves as an advocate and a liaison between South Dakota Game Fish and Parks and its stakeholders, the people of South Dakota. And Marianne is just that. She is a great listener and advocate. Her interest and experience utilize our great outdoor experience, especially those in our state parks and recreational areas, and has provided a very positive perspective to the Commission. I would encourage your support.
Thank you, sir. Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, the question before you, senators, is do you advise and consent to the executive reappointment of Marianne Boyd to the Game Fish and Parks Commission? Those in support of that appointment will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Bolin? Kamak? Cronin? Kurd? Ewing? Frerichs? Greenfield? Haverly? Heinert? Jensen? Kennedy? Killer? Oh. Klum? Colbeck? Langer? Maher? Monroe? Nelson? Nesseba? Netherton? Norstrup? Otten? Partridge? Peters? Rush? Russell? Soholt? Solano? Stalzer? Sutton? Tapio? Tiedemann? White? Wick? Youngberg? Mr. President, there are 35 yeas.
Thank you. The question, do you senators advise and consent to the executive reappointment of Marianne Boyd to the Game Fish and Parks Commission, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed, and her reappointment is so confirmed. First reading of House bills. We have bills that need to be read in open session, just the title and the numbers. And then in the Senate, Senator Greenfield, who's the President pro tem, assigns them to committees for hearing. Again, for the reasons I explained, we need to do this orally, although it is in our computer now. Please proceed.
House Bill 1136, an act to revise certain provisions related to cooperatives. 1165, an act to repeal certain provisions providing for a pilot charter school for Native American students if the state had received a federal grant. House Bill 1172, an act to revise certain provisions regarding meetings of certain public bodies. 1176, an act to revise certain provisions regarding campaign finance disclosure reports. And finally, House Bill 1249, an act to authorize the training of tribal law officers at the Law Enforcement Training Center.
Following committees will hear these bills. Commerce will hear 1136, Educational 1165, Judiciary 1249, House Bill 1172, Local Government, and State Affairs will hear House Bill 1176. We have appointments again now. These appointments of individuals to various positions by the governor. Executive appointments are on the consent calendar. We have 3 of them. A consent calendar is a non-debatable calendar. Questions may be asked. We do this for efficiency purposes. And I've been informed that the appointment of Mr. Zelmer has been removed for tomorrow to the debate calendar. So we'll proceed with the remaining executive appointments under the consent calendar, please.
The Senate proceeds to the consideration of the executive appointment of Jamie Huizenga of Pierre to the South Dakota Lottery Commission, and the Senate proceeds to the consideration of the executive reappointment of James Breckenridge of Sioux Falls to the South Dakota Building Authority.
Any questions? Hearing none, Senators, the question before you is, do you advise and consent to the reappointment of Jim Breckenridge to the South Dakota Building Authority and to Jamie Huizenga of Hughes County here to the South Dakota Lottery Commission? Those in favor, that would have been an appointment. Those in favor of the reappointment and the appointment as stated will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Bolin? Kamak? Cronin? Kurd? Ewing? Frerichs? Greenfield? Haverly? Heinert? Jensen? Kennedy? Killer? Klum? Colbeck? Langer? Maher? Monroe? Nelson? Nesseba? Netherton? Norstrup? Otten? Partridge? Peters? Rush? Russell? Soholt? Solano? Stalzer? Sutton? Tapio? Tiedemann? White? Wick? Youngberg? Mr. President, there are 35 yeas.
Thank you. The Advice and consent of the executive appointment of Jamie Heisinga to the South Dakota Lottery Commission and the reappointment of Mr. Jim Breckenridge to the South Dakota Building Authority. Having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed, and those that appointment and reappointment are so confirmed. On behalf of Senator Killer, we'd like to welcome up here your Kadoka School, right? Would you please stand? This is the senior class, 2018 class, Kadoka High School. Today, with their government teacher, Mr. Ortman, brings them. Thank you so much for doing that. It's very, very dedicated. There are a number of schools that don't do that, and so it's very important. And thankfully, you take the time to come here. And the superintendent of school, Mr. Herman, thank you so much for encouraging it and being part of it. On behalf of Senator Killer, but all of us, welcome from Kadoka. Okay, we are now on to what we call our, our consent calendar. We have bills that, again, came out of committee unanimously that for efficiency purposes we don't debate, but questions may be asked. So let's proceed with our consent calendar.
Senate Bill 144, an act to revise certain provisions related to party affiliation on voter registration cards. Senate Bill 209, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the Nutrient Research and Education Council. Senate Bill 153, an act to require disclosure of certain fees being imposed by overnight lodging accommodations. House Bill 1155, an act to revise certain provisions regarding crop liens. House Bill 1018, an act to update and revise certain references and provisions regarding state agencies and the employment of certain public employees. And finally, House Bill 1023, an act to repeal certain provisions regarding pipeline safety.
Okay, House Bills 1115, 1018, 1023, and Senate Bills 144, 209, and 153, having received a second reading, are up for consideration and final passage. Are there any questions, Senators, on any of these bills? Hearing none, the question before the Senate is final passage of House Bill 1115, 1018, 1023, and Senate Bills 144, 209, and 153. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Bolin. Aye. Kamak. Aye. Cronin. Aye. Kurd. Aye. Ewing. Aye. Frerichs. Aye. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. Aye. Heinert. Aye. Jensen. Aye. Kennedy. Aye. Pardon? Aye. Killer. Aye. Klum. Aye. Kolbeck. Aye. Langer. Aye. Maher. Aye. Monroe. Aye. Nelson. Aye. Nesseba. Aye. Netherton. Aye. Northrup. Aye. Otten. Aye. Partridge. Aye. Peters. Aye. Rush. Aye. Russell. Aye. Soholt. Aye. Solano. Aye. Stalzer. Aye. Sutton. Aye. Tapio. Aye. Tiedemann. Aye. White. Wick. Aye. Youngberg. Mr. President, there are 35 yeas.
Thank you. House Bill 1115, 1018, 1023, and Senate Bill 144, 209, and 153. All having received a majority vote of the members-elect are all hereby declared passed. Any questions on any of these titles? Hearing none, thank you, Jill, and we will now proceed with our debate calendar. Second reading of Senate bills. Will you please call 117?
Senate Bill 117, an act to revise certain provisions regarding the Partners in Education Tax Credit Program.
Thank you. Senate Bill 117, having received a second reading, is sorry, there was something in my throat. It's called a tongue. I've got to get rid of it. Any remarks? Thank you, Senator Stalzer, for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. President. As most of you know, the Partners in Education program was passed 2 years ago, and in its operation, it actually allows insurance companies to donate. Lost the sponge off of there, which was causing a little trouble. Anyway, insurance companies donate to a fund, which then goes to the Great Plains Education Foundation, which gives scholarships to low-income students to attend private schools. In operation over the last 3 years, we found three minor issues that we would like to address. The first, currently they are writing checks twice a year, once for each semester. In this time, we've had 5 students drop out, and the contract already requires the school to reimburse on a prorated basis any students that don't finish a semester. So what we're asking is the ability to write one check for the entire school year, saves 500 kids' parents having to drop a second check off at the school and deposit it. Anyone that does drop out, it gets reimbursed anyway and goes back into the future scholarships. We inadvertently, when we did this, put the requirement for free and reduced lunches locked into January 1st of 2016. We just want to remove that restriction so that that date floats every year, and every year it ties to the actual free and reduced lunches for that calendar school year, or I guess calendar year. And then the last thing we want to do is change the annual report from March to June. Currently, the donations have to be reported annually. The scholarship money gets reported in March. So if somebody were to drop out in April, May, or June, we wouldn't have the numbers matching the entire school year. So we're just asking that that report be due in June, so it's at the end of the school year, and you can see an entire school year instead of part of one year and part of another school. And that's all it does, and I would ask for your positive vote.
Thank you, sir. Further remarks? Senator Peters.
Thank you. I have a question for the sponsor.
State your question, ma'am.
The question I have is, you said you were going to get the refunds back. So if a student goes in, you're going to issue one payment for the year. If a student drops at halfway through the semester, you're going to get a refund. What kind of internal controls do you have in place in the scholarship program to ensure that as children drop out of private school and are no longer utilizing the scholarship, that you get the money back?
Do you care to answer the question, Senator Stalzer?
Yes. All of these reports have to be certified by a certified public accountant. So they are looked at and audited annually, and a report is issued.
Thank you. Senator Peters, you have the floor. Do you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up.
Please state your question.
Thank you. The question is regards to the scholarship payment to the school. The scholarship payment goes to the parents pay it to the school, and if you only are doing it once a year, what is the control mechanism to ensure that the school gives the money back to either the parent or to the scholarship program if the student unenrolls out of the private school?
Senator Stalzer, do you wish to answer that question?
I guess the only thing I can answer is it is contractually required for the school to return that money to the scholarship granting organization.
Senator Peters, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you. I guess I have a lot of concerns about the internal controls of the mechanisms of following the money. I have a lot of concerns with the scholarship program to begin with, but not knowing that the controls are in place to ensure that the money actually makes it back into the program is a little bit more concerning to me. There's got to be a mechanism in there to oversee the school districts. Even though it's contractual, we have seen it through the granting organizations, whether it's the federal, the state, or the local governments, that we have to beef up our internal controls, and if we don't have those in place, we might have some misappropriation of funds.
Thank you. Senator Heiner, Matakupi, and then Senator Bolin, I'll come to you. Matakupi, sir.
Mitakupi, Mr. President. Question for the prime sponsor.
State your question, sir.
How many children are currently using this scholarship program?
Senator Stalzer, do you care to answer the question?
It is just slightly under 500.
Senator Heiner, you have the floor.
Follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Do you know how much, what the dollar figure is that has been donated?
Senator Stalzer, do you care to answer the question?
It's in the $280,000 range.
Senator Heiner, you have the
Give or take a
floor.
little bit.
Okay, and maybe just one follow-up, because I just need a little
Please.
bit of
Yes, sir.
clarification.
Please.
So you say these insurance companies, they they submit this in lieu of taxes to, and I'm sorry I missed the name of the organization that then writes the check to the private school. Is
I
that,
think it's Great
is that
Plains,
the?
isn't it? Is it Great Plains? Great Plains Education.
Great Plains Education, okay.
Senator Heiner, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. Well, I guess, you know, I understand where the good senator is going with this. I had no idea it was that many students and that amount of money. Like the good senator from eastern South Dakota, yeah, Minnehaha County, I don't know. There you go. Yeah, it's a big county. I am concerned that if a student unenrolls in this private school, and then that money, does that go back to the Great Plains, whatever business that is, and does that get reinvested in another child? You know, what is the overhead cost of this group running this? You know, and this is $280,000 that we don't get to count and use for all of these other public school kids. So those are my concerns. Palamia.
Palamia. Senator Cronin, or excuse me, Bolin.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry to have done that to you, Senator Bolin.
Well, that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, you're
the good senator from
you're both
Gettysburg.
incredibly good looking, but only one of you has a daughter serving here today.
Okay, very
Thank
good.
you,
And
Senator
we have
Bolin.
served together for our entire 10 years in the legislature. Just a little bit of information. We heard testimony on this bill, which makes 3 small technical changes to this program, that this last year there were 3 students, 3 of the number that the good senator from Minnehaha County referenced, that that had removed themselves from the private schools and that the money had been returned to the Great Plains Foundation. So we're talking right now about a very, very small numbers, and this is just a very small number. So I don't think there's any real need for any concern here. People who serve on this board, again, I'm not going to try to take the testimony away from the good senator from District 11, I believe, over here. But they're all volunteers, the people who serve on the board and make these awards. So I would encourage your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further remarks? Does anybody wish to speak before Senator Stalzer gives his closing? Okay, thank you. Senator Stalzer.
Okay. This bill simply does the 3 things I mentioned. The amount of auditing, how this is returned, that's exactly the way it is now. It makes no change to that, so it has nothing to do with the bill as proposed. The same thing with the good senator from Native American country. None of those things change anything in the bill. This is merely 3 minor technical changes, and those other considerations have nothing that's in this particular bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further remarks? I was asked questions as to whether or not it requires 2/3. Earlier today, it does not. It's just a reformat of the program. It doesn't modify any of the distribution of the credits. Therefore, it requires a majority vote for passage. Hearing no further remarks, the question before the Senate is final passage of Senate Bill 117. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Bolin. Aye. Kamak. Aye. Cronin. Aye. Kurd. Aye. Ewing. Aye. Frerichs. Aye. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. No. Heinert. Aye. Jensen. Aye. Kennedy. Aye. Killer. Aye. Klum. Aye. Kolbeck. Aye. Langer. Aye. Maher. Aye. Monroe. Aye. Nelson. Aye. Nesseba. Aye. Netherton. Aye. Norstrup. Aye. Otten. Aye. Partridge. Aye. Peters. No. Rush. Aye. Russell. Aye. Toholt. Aye. Solano? Stalzer? Sutton? Tapio? Tiedemann? White? Wick? Youngberg? Nesseba? Mr. President, there are 29 yeas and 6 nays.
Senate Bill 117, having received a majority vote of the members elect, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? I'll approve the title before I call the next bill. Mr. Hobart, are you up here? Right there. Thank you so much, sir, from Selby Area High School. He's here with his senior class, the government class from Selby area. Thanks for bringing them. It's very important. Selby area, on behalf of Senator Cronin, who looks like Senator Boland but is younger. Please stand. Thank you. Okay, 112.
Senate Bill 112, an act to repeal certain provisions requiring the Attorney General to obtain the consent of the governor prior to commencing an investigation.
Thank you. Senate Bill 112, having received a second reading, is up for consideration and final passage.
Thank
Senator
you,
Rush,
Mr.
good
President.
afternoon, sir. You're welcome.
I rise in support of Senate Bill 112. Frankly, this was a statute that I had not been familiar with until we began looking at it the other day. But 1-11-7 and some of the subsequent statutes authorize the Attorney General to make an investigation only with the consent of the governor. Now, the statutes say that the Attorney General, the legislature can ask the Attorney General to make an investigation, the governor can ask the Attorney General to make an investigation, or the Attorney General can commence an investigation, but only if the governor consents to that. That really eliminates the checks and balances there, and we talked with the Attorney General about that, and he didn't see that as a problem because 1-11-1, subsection 2, says that when requested by the governor or either branch of the legislature or whenever in his judgment the welfare of the state demands to appear for the state and prosecute or defend in any court before any officer, the Attorney General, any civil or criminal case in which the state may be a party or interested. So the Attorney General says he has felt that he's been unrestricted by that limitation on obtaining the consent of the governor because of the other provision which allows him to prosecute and defend without the consent of the governor. But prosecute and defend a case and investigate a case are really two different things. Now, he certainly construes that his authority to prosecute and defend a case also gives him the authority to investigate the case. And, I think that's probably true, but I don't think we want to be in the position where we have conflicting statutes. One that says that the Attorney General can prosecute and defend a case without obtaining the governor's consent, and the other one that says he can only investigate the case with the governor's consent. Now, I've talked to a number of people about that, and the real concern about that is the possibility of politicization of these investigations. If we end up with a governor and an attorney general of opposite parties, what's to stop the attorney general from motivating or instituting investigations for political reasons? And that's a legitimate concern. But on the other hand, if we contain that statute, then what's the opportunity if the governor is involved in some kind of malfeasance to stop the Attorney General from investigating him, too, by exercising that discretion? I'm always in favor of anything that makes it easier for judges to decide cases. And when you end up with conflicting statutes like that, it's a problem in trying to interpret what the intent is. I think the advantage of having the checks and balances where the Attorney General can do his investigation, doesn't have to get the governor's consent, outweighs the possible detriments. I haven't gone back and looked historically, but I'm sure there have been times when we've had governors and attorney generals of opposite political parties, and I'm not familiar that that's been a problem with that. I am aware of the fact, I know at various times have known most of the state's attorneys who also have the authority to investigate and prosecute crimes, and I've not been aware of the fact that that's been a problem with state's attorneys instituting investigations that were solely designed to embarrass the other political party. So I don't, it's certainly a possibility, but it's also a possibility that the governor would try to frustrate investigations of their wrongdoing. And I'll throw an advertisement in here. If any of you read my book where I'm talking about the territorial governors, that there was clearly wrongdoing on those territorial governors, and it would have been appropriate to have had somebody that could do investigations of those governors at that time, but they didn't happen. And so I think that this is a good bill. I think it restores checks and balances the way it ought to be, and certainly like many of the laws that we propose, it has its possible downsides, but I don't think it's likely to happen. So I think that this is a good bill that eliminates what we have that's really a conflict in our existing statutes. So I would appreciate your support.
Thank you, sir. And by the way, if you're interested in buying the book, it's www.rushbooks.com. But wait, if you call now or email now, but there is more. There is more. Please welcome Senator Solano. What's more, Senator Solano?
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, questions for maybe the last speaker, the prime sponsor of the
Bring
bill.
it on. What's your question, sir?
So, first question I would have is, was the bill brought at the request of the Attorney General's office?
Senator Rush, do you care to answer the question, sir?
It was not, because the Attorney General felt that he proceeds under the other statute and that he didn't need this one clarified. But
Senator Solano, you have the floor.
Follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
Was it brought at the request of the governor's office?
Senator Rush, do you care to answer the question?
I don't know that it was brought at the request of anybody other than one of our senators who saw the potential conflict there. Okay.
Senator Solano, you have the floor.
Thank you for that. Well, as I read through this, I'm trying to understand the motivation as to why we're bringing this legislation, and looking at who testified, and there was the Attorney General that showed up as an other on the minutes, and it looked like provided comment that he or his office has not ran into any problem under current statute. But I do think in this situation that words do matter. And in the good senator that spoke on this talked about the repeal section in 1-11-8 is very specific to investigate. And the other section of code that was quoted, I believe, is very specific as it relates to, can be called on by the governor's office, called on by the legislature, or on his or her own behalf, I'm paraphrasing, of course, to defend or prosecute in court for the state of South Dakota. And I think there was very intention of that as you would think about defend or prosecute in court versus this other section of statute, which is very specific to initiating an investigation that is not to a point of knowing whether it's going to be going to court or not. So it gives me reason to pause, and I think we should be concerned if we've had this on the books for as long as it has through many attorney generals, and we've not had a problem with this in the past. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the good senator for explaining the bill.
Thank you, Senator Solano. Further remarks? Senator Kennedy, good afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. I, too, rise in opposition to this bill. My concern is that this may change the role of the Attorney General in a way that we don't quite understand just based on the language of this statute. Lawyers, including the Attorney General, represent clients. Lawyers don't go out and start lawsuits on their own. They don't go out and bring actions just because they want to. Lawyers are hired by people or are, in this case, charged by statute with a responsibility to represent other people. The scheme of Chapter 1-11 of the Code makes it very clear that the Attorney General is the attorney for the state, is the attorney for the legislature, is attorney for the governor. And the statutory scheme makes it clear that the legislature can authorize the Attorney General to do an investigation, the governor can authorize the Attorney General to do an investigation, and you've heard about the statute that also authorizes the Attorney General in certain circumstances to prosecute or defend in the interest of justice. My concern here is that by making the amendment that is proposed, we're creating an Attorney General that is somehow different. The Attorney General is no longer a lawyer. Now the Attorney General could conceivably be some sort of super investigator who can go out and do whatever happens to interest that Attorney General at that given moment in time. And that's inconsistent with the role of a lawyer. It's even inconsistent with the role of a prosecutor. And as my good colleague from Pennington County noted, this is potentially subject to politicization because in certain circumstances, the motivation for an investigation may not be that somebody believes that there has been a specific law violated, but someone may believe that there's just something going on that they want to dig into and find out about. In law, we call those fishing expeditions. And sometimes people engage in those for a lot of different reasons. But that's not really the role the Attorney General should have. And as my colleague from Pennington County pointed out, this law has been on the books since 1939. There's no issue. This didn't come from the governor. This didn't come from the Attorney General. And I think we should be very careful about changing that law unless we truly understand what all of the ramifications of the change are. So I would urge the body to vote no on this bill.
Thank you, sir. Senator Langer, good afternoon. Those are beautiful flowers. What's the occasion?
Oh, well, thank you. I guess my husband just thought I needed some flowers, so.
Oh, way to go. Tell him nice husband guilt for the rest of us.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good.
I, too, rise in opposition to this bill. I think it is a solution looking for a problem. I had a pretty extensive conversation with the Attorney General, who assured me that this is not a problem. He has never once been told by the governor that he can't do an investigation. And I do believe that in 1939, when they put this in, there was a very good reason. I think there's a checks and balance reason here, and I think I just urge the body to oppose this.
Thank you, ma'am. Further remarks? Senator Greenfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to point out that the rest of her bouquet is on my desk.
Well done. Well done. You're a giver.
These are the flowers that the senator who sits kitty corner from Senator Langer is allergic to.
Oh.
Apparently, I'm not. One of the few things that I'm not allergic to.
Taking one for the team.
That's right. This isn't my baby, but having sat on the committee and having contemplated this issue, and having heard some of the things that have been said here today, I felt that maybe I could at least try to shine some light as to what my thought process was. I do believe that we have conflicting language in the code, and I do believe, well, it's clear in fact that in one case the code essentially makes a constitutionally elected office subservient to another. Both the governor and the attorney general are constitutional offices held by people who are duly elected. From time to time, it could be that those people are of different parties. And we've heard from the Attorney General that essentially there are two courses of action that a person can take. that you can subscribe to 1-11-1 subsection 2 or 1-11-8. Given that there is a conflict and we should be about trying to make consistency within our law, I felt that it was appropriate to go ahead and support the bill. The argument that this isn't a problem, I guess, should provide you with some comfort level that if this bill should pass, the sky won't fall. The Attorney General will still be able to do his or her job and will not have to seek consent from the governor, from the governor's office to do that job. So that, again, I don't know what the necessarily the reason for giving tremendous pause is. Take a look at 1-11-1 and 1-11-8, see the conflicts that exist, and hopefully you can join me and the rest of the body in trying to iron out one of the wrinkles in our law. With that, I'd urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further remarks? Does anybody wish to speak before Senator Rush gives his closing? Okay, Senator Rush, thank you for your patience. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would agree that this has apparently not been a problem that we're aware of, and the reason it's not been a problem since 1939, at least according to the Attorney General's explanation, is he's ignored one of the statutes. And I don't think we should be putting him in the position where he has to ignore one of that statutes. The other part of that is, yes, we've not had a problem, but what happens when an Attorney General's investigation uncovers wrongdoing by somebody who then comes in and moves to have all of the results of that investigation stricken because the Attorney General didn't have the permission from the governor to do that, and the whole case goes out the window because of the fact that the court decides that he had to have the permission of the governor to do that. And that's the kind of thing that concerns me. And my good friend from Yankton County, who also has served in the capacity of state's attorney, as I have, knows that a prosecutor, a state's attorney, and attorney general are in a different capacity. They are also the chief law enforcement officer of that jurisdiction. The Attorney General and the state's attorney have got obligations to go forward with investigations if they think that there's wrongdoing. The state's attorney, there isn't a limitation on them. They don't have to get the county commissioner's permission to go forward with their investigation if they think there was some wrongdoing. And the Attorney General shouldn't have to get the governor's permission. That, and I'm not saying it's happened, but that could potentially happen, include wrongdoing by the governor themselves. So that's why I think that we need two independent bodies that can go ahead with an investigation without the governor's permission. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, the question before the Senate is final passage of Senate Bill 112. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Boland? Aye. Kamak? Aye. Cronin? Aye. Kurd? Aye. Ewing? Aye. Frerichs? Aye. Greenfield? Aye. Haverly? No. Heinert? No. Jensen? Aye. Kennedy? No. Killer? No. Klum? No. Colbeck? Langer? No. Maher? Aye. Monroe? No. Nelson? Aye. Neseba? No. Netherton? Aye. Northrup? Aye. Otten? Aye. Partridge? No. Peters? No. Rush? Aye. Russell? Aye. Soholt? No. Solano? No. Stalzer? Sutton? No. Tapio? Aye. Tiedemann? No. White? Aye. Wick? Aye. Youngberg? No. Mr. President, there are 20 yeas and 15 nays.
Senate Bill 112, having received a majority vote of the members elected, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on this title? The title's approved. See, are mostly Bankers Association folks, right? before you go, tonight, I'll announce it as well. We have an incredible reception tonight, not only with you and your foundation, but the awards for the entrepreneurs. It's pretty fascinating. If you're not planning on coming, please change your plans. And then also, before you leave, based on a lot of us, we have outrun our coverage in getting married and who we married. Senator Sutton, did you want to talk about how you really did way up in terms of your marital abilities?
Well, I wouldn't say I outran my coverage.
Okay. You know,
Just
I
saying.
did. I mean, I can't do that because if I did it, I'd be hashtagged forever. So
Real cool, man.
sweet dude, go. Do some in-law suck up right now. Go.
That's what I'm planning on. I'm going to give my father-in-law permission to stand up if he would. George Kinsey is here. He is president of First Fidelity Bank and my father-in-law, and he's also become a very good friend. I'm pretty fortunate to have the in-laws that I have. And so he's here, and then also his daughter, which happens to be my wife, who is my best friend and partner and mother to Liam. First woman county commissioner in the history of Gregory County, and
Wow.
pretty incredible individual. So if you would, welcome them. That's Kelsey and
Great
George.
to see you. Where is he? Where is he? I couldn't. Oh, yeah. Yep. People came sneaking in here. All the way from a long trip. I know we'll have a great conversation tonight, but a person that I've looked up to for many, many years. Governor Frank Farrar. Governor, good to see you, sir. Please come out tonight for the business plan competition, those young people. It's amazing, and thank you to the Bankers Foundation for sponsoring that. We're on to now bills that pass the House, and they're subject to debate. We have a number that are appropriations and emergency bills to get going with, so second reading of House bills.
House Bill 1043, an act to authorize the construction of a National Guard Readiness Center at the Rapid City Airport, to make an appropriation therefore, and to declare an emergency.
Thank you. House Bill 1043, having received a second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Senator Partridge, appropriate for you to pitch this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1043 is a special appropriation bill that we have budgeted for towards the first-year construction costs of a new readiness center adjacent to our Armory Aviation Support Facility at the Rapid City Regional Airport. There is yet another military term that I learned called MILCON. This is military construction, not too complicated, but what we're going to be moving forward with. Presently, there are 8 aviation units comprised of 154 soldiers occupying that space. They do not have the needed training, supply, and admin space necessary to adequately support these units. Therefore, they are considered homeless. The project is to construct a 58,751 square foot National Guard Readiness Center with backup emergency power and access control building, vehicle parking areas, necessary road, sidewalk, curb, gutter, store, all that good stuff. The facility will be designed to meet a minimum of 50 years in its lifespan, and will engage in the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, otherwise known as LEED, Silver standards. So there is already space at the airport, and they have the site plan ready to go for this situation, for moving forward with this construction project. The project has the unique benefit of resolving shortfalls for both Readiness Center space and Army Aviation Support Facility space that the units are now occupying. Deferring the construction of this facility could impact these units' ability to quickly respond to emergencies, fires, floods, catastrophes of many nature, as well as negatively impact unit readiness and soldier morale. So, money is tight, but we have figured out how to appropriate for this. Basically, we're going to spend $500,000 in fiscal year 19, so that's what we're asking for is $500,000. $615,000 is going to come from the Army Guard maintenance and repair budget, and then, of course, the rest is in federal funds. Overall, this entire project is about $20 million, 15 of which is federal, 5 of which will be state. So this is a much-needed project going out to that facility. Will show how tight the space is, and they're just operating out of a closet right now and really need to move forward with this project. So it's a project that we actually got bumped up for in terms of our time frame for South Dakota through the leadership of our Adjutant General Reich, and I urge your favorable consideration of House Bill 1043.
Thank you. Senator Nessebar, good afternoon.
Good morning, Mr. President. It's morning. It seems like morning. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Just a question for the prime sponsor.
Yes, sir. Please state.
There just seemed to be a disconnect. I think you said there was $5 million worth of state money and $500,000 that we're appropriating. Is there going to be a future appropriation related to this bill?
Senator Partridge, do you care to answer the question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question for the good senator from Minnehaha. This construction project is one that doesn't fit nicely into a fiscal year. And so when we're looking at what to do and go forward, it doesn't always fit in terms of how it will fit inside the fiscal year. Fortunately, actually, this 2-year construction project is spread across 3 fiscal years. And so what we're doing is conservatively asking for part of the money today, and yes, we'll be asking for more of the money in the future, but you have to do that in planning for it, and you have to do that in order to get the federal money. So I look to the leaders of the state as well as in our military for that appropriation into the future, but for today we're looking for just a $500,000 appropriation, and again, the construction doesn't fit neatly into the box of 1 fiscal year. Thanks for the question.
Senator Nessebar, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the good senator from Pennington County for clarifying that. I do think it is a good project. I just thought the record should reflect that we will have future appropriations on this one. Thank you.
Very good, sir. Thank you. Senator Haverly.
Thank you,
Good
Mr.
afternoon,
President.
ma'am. Go blue.
Thank you, sir. I felt compelled to speak on this since it's less than a mile away from my house. Readiness for our military is very important right now. The South Dakota National Guard has deployed at very, very high rates since September 11th, and the aviation units statewide have seen some of the highest rates of deployment. So making sure that these facilities are adequate to improve their readiness is very critical at this time. I would hope that you would vote yes to authorize this important construction, and I'm very, very proud of my civilian counterpart for learning what MilCon is and how important that is.
Very good. Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, the question before the Senate is final passage of House Bill 1043. It does require 2/3 majority vote for passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Bolin? Kamak? Cronin? Kurd? Ewing? Frerichs? Greenfield? Haverly? Heinert? Jensen? Kennedy? Killer? Klum? Kolbeck? Langer? Maher? Monroe? Nelson? Nessebar? Netherton? Norstrup? Otten? Partridge? Peters? Rush? Russell? Soholt? Solano? Stalzer? Sutton? Tapio? Tiedemann? White? Wick? Youngberg? Kurd? Mr. President, there are 35 yeas.
House Bill 1043, having received a 2/3 majority vote for passage, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? Before I call the next bill, thank you for the debate on that. I have responsibility for oversight of our military and just want you to know, and especially for those who are in or media professionals, that the main unit, the Black Hawk unit, there is in country right now. People were very judicious in not talking about it, but they're in theater right now. Our Blackhawks are Blackhawk Mike's the most modern, and they're not just flying around, they're saving lives. Please proceed.
House Bill 1060, an act to authorize the South Dakota Building Authority and the Board of Regents to finance, design, and renovate the Dakota Dome at the University of South Dakota and to make an appropriation therefor.
House Bill 1060, having received a second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Senator Sutton, this is a USD bill.
It is. It is.
Okay, we'll call on you. Let's go.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Good, thanks.
House Bill 1060. This bill authorizes the South Dakota Building Authority and the Board of Regents to finance renovation of the Dakota Dome at the University of South Dakota. One of the state's most recognizable man-made landmarks, the Dakota Dome has served as a cornerstone of USD athletics for decades. Originally constructed in 1979, the 10,000-seat facility was one of the first multi-purpose domes in the country. Today it serves as home for all Coyote athletic teams with the exception of men and women's basketball and volleyball. In addition to Coyote athletic teams and events, the Dakota Dome hosts many other events. Championship games of the state high school football playoffs take place annually inside the dome. The annual high school all-star football game is played each summer inside the dome. The Dakota Farm Show has called the dome home for more than 30 years. The facility also hosts community events such as camps, South Dakota junior football, high school track meets, and graduation ceremonies. The nearly 40-year-old building needs significant updates for mechanical and electrical replacement, HVAC, plumbing, fire alarm system, restroom facilities, lighting and sound, locker rooms, meeting rooms, coaching offices, and support spaces. Renovation of the Dakota Dome to accommodate improvements allows USD to meet international building and fire code requirements and will provide a safer facility for students, staff, faculty, and visitors. 9 design firm proposals were released for the Dakota Dome renovation project. USD and the Office of the State Engineer ranked these based on the criteria established by the state engineer. The top 3 firms with the most points based on these criteria will be interviewed on site by a building committee for selection of one design firm for the project. The Office of State Engineer also sent out a request for qualifications for construction manager at risk services in early January. Those qualifications were to be submitted back to the state officials by February 2nd. Funding for the project is $6.4 million from university capital funds, $5.4 million from higher education facilities funds, maintenance and repair funds, and $14.5 million in bond proceeds, which the debt is serviced by a private fund commitment from the USD Foundation. Estimated total project costs for all program functions are $26.32 million in FY 2017 dollars. I encourage your positive vote on House Bill 1040.
Thank you, Senator Sutton. Senator Rush, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also urge your support of this. The Dakota Dome has been a fantastic facility for South Dakota sports teams over the last 40 years. There's been weekends when there's game after game after game goes on in there, particularly when the weather is inclement and teams move their football games there from all over eastern South Dakota. Obviously, after 40 years, the building needs some updating. They did update it a few years ago and put the new hard roof on it rather than the inflatable dome that they started out. The question was asked to me, well, why don't you tear it down and build a new dome? Well, if we had an extra $150 million or up to $1 billion that they spent up in Minneapolis, that would probably be my preference too, but I don't see us having that kind of money. So spending $26 million to renovate it is a good South Dakota solution to this problem.
Thank you. Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, it does require a 2/3 majority vote for passage. Those in favor of 1060 will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Boland. Aye. Kamak. Aye. Cronin. Aye. Kurd. Aye. Ewing. Aye. Frerichs. Aye. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. Aye. Heinert. Aye. Jensen. Aye. Kennedy. Aye. Killer. Aye. Klum. Aye. Kolbeck. Aye. Langer. Aye. Maher. Monroe. Aye. Nelson. Aye. Nesseba. Aye. Netherton. Aye. Norstrup. Aye. Otten. Partridge. Peters. Rush. Russell. Soholt. Solano. Stalzer. Sutton. Tapio. Tiedemann. White. Wick. Youngberg. Nelson. Mr. President, there are 33 yeas and 2 nays.
House Bill 1060, having received a 2/3 majority vote for passage, is hereby declared passed. Story time, I was a little boy when the dome was built, and right after it was built, it had a soft roof, and people would get up there to shovel snow off. One time, right before the lawsuit involving the design, it actually started to collapse, and so Mr. Erickson, who was head of the physical plant, got out a shotgun and tried to shoot holes through it to try to make it drain. It didn't work, but resulted in litigation, so it's that's South Dakota ingenuity, right, Senator? He remembers that, so pretty amazing times. And, you know, dome dogs were born. Please proceed.
Mr. President, may I have personal privilege?
I'm sorry, Senator Frerichs. I thought you were signaling to me that you're up on the next bill, but
No,
Senator Frerichs, personal privilege, I apologize.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. Well, I want to introduce the body to my brother, Aaron. He's back up here in the corner, and if you could, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, there he's coming out, I guess, now. But I want to introduce him. He's older than me by 6 years, or roughly, but when my dad was serving over in the House, or our dad was, he spent some time out here, but this is his only time that he's been back here in the legislature since I've been serving for 10 years. He's back on the home front taking care of everything, and I claim the credit that I am farming, but he's actually back there doing the farming. So please welcome my brother
Hey,
Aaron.
Aaron, good to see you again. I apologize to you both. Senator Frerichs, he was right behind that post, trying to hide. There you go, man. Let's see your beautiful face. Tell your dad hi, and that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Next bill.
House Bill 1061, an act to authorize the Board of Regents to contract for the construction of 2 athletic and recreational fields and related structures at Northern State University, to make an appropriation therefore and to declare an emergency.
House Bill 1061, having received a second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Senator White, good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. You too. I'm just hoping you don't shoot any holes in this one.
The kiss of death.
I'm bringing House Bill 1061 today, and basically this is to construct 2 athletic and recreation fields at Northern State University. This project includes the construction of 2 synthetic turf fields, a pavilion, and a small restroom at Northern State University. The 2-story pavilion will include 2 locker rooms, training rooms, storage for maintenance equipment, and a lower level, and an upper level which include offices for coaches, restrooms, concessions, media, and meeting rooms. One field, why is it necessary? One field will be a practice field for the Northern State University football team. The new Regional Science Education Center at Northern State is being built on the current football practice field, therefore a new one is needed. The second field will be used for a women's soccer team for practice and competition. Since the current competition field does not meet the NCAA regulations, a new turf field will be designed to comply with those regulations. The fields will also be available for use by the general student population for intramurals and other recreational events, and as an outdoor classroom for exercise, science, wellness, and education courses. Students from the School of the Blind and Visually Impaired will also have access to these fields, as this is adjacent to this property. Other factors of the complex include fan seating on both sides of the pavilion, lighted fields, and a small restroom located at the far side of the field. The restroom will be accessible from the player dugout and also by individuals using the tennis courts. The entire complex will be enclosed with attractive fencing to secure the premises and control access to the fields. Funding for this project includes other fund expenditure authority for $6 million from private gifts donated for this purpose, and $303,314 in higher education facilities funds, maintenance and repair funds. The fields and pavilions will be built on land owned by Northern State, therefore there is no land cost. Construction of this is to be completed by the fall of 2018, therefore ready for the football season. I encourage you to give a positive vote on House Bill 1061. Thank you.
Further remarks? Hearing no further remarks, the question before the Senate is final passage of House Bill 1061. As Senator White indicated, it requires a two-thirds majority vote for passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Senator Boland. Kamak. Cronin. Kurd. Ewing. Frerichs. Greenfield. Haverly. Heinert. Jensen. Kennedy. Killer. Klum. Kobeck. Langer. Maher. Monroe. Nelson. Nesseba. Netherton. Norstrup. Otten. Partridge. Peters. Rush. Russell. Soholt. Solano. Stalzer. Sutton. Tapio. Tiedemann. White. Wick. Youngberg. Mr. President, there are 33 yeas and 2 nays.
House Bill 1061, having received a two-thirds majority vote for passage, is hereby declared passed. Any title questions? I'll approve the title then. Thank you.
House Bill 1062, an act to authorize the Board of Regents to purchase unimproved real property in Brown County, to make an appropriation therefore, and to declare an emergency.
House Bill 1062, having received second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Senator Cronin, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the Senate. House Bill 1062 will authorize the acquisition of unimproved real property in the city of Aberdeen. The property in question is a narrow strip of land, used to be an abandoned railroad. It's about 53 feet wide, 750 foot long, just a little under 9/10 of an acre. This lot is currently owned by the NSU Foundation. They purchased it from the entity that owned just that abandoned track a few years ago. Northern State currently owns the university currently owns the land on the west side of it, and the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired owns the land on the east side of it. It's just a strip in there that could be used for a parking lot. The university plans to do this because they built a couple different residence facilities down in that corner of the campus, and part of the donation from one of the families was that they had to improve the parking along with the project. So that's what this does. It's going to cost about $25,000 of the money that was gifted to the university to build this parking lot, and it seeks the other fund expenditure authority to do so. So just a side note, for the past 20 years I've been using it as a parking lot. It's grass because I'd always show up to the game about a half hour late. So I, along with the people that had to put up vehicle tracks in there, would really appreciate a yes vote on House Bill 1062.
Thank you. Further remarks? Hearing none, the question before the Senate's final passage of House Bill 1062 requires a two-thirds majority vote for passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Senator Boland. Kamak. Cronin. Kurd. Ewing. Frerichs. Greenfield. Haverly. Heinert. Jensen. Kennedy. Killer. Klum. Kobeck. Langer. Maher. Monroe. Nelson. Nesseba. Netherton. Norstrup. Otten. Partridge. Peters. Rush. Russell. Soholt. Solano. Stalzer. Sutton. Tapio. Tiedemann. White. Wick. Youngberg. Mr. President, there are 33 yeas and 2 nays.
Thank you. House Bill 1062, having received a 2/3 majority vote for passage, is hereby declared passed. Any questions on the title? I'll approve it then. Thank you.
House Bill 1065, an act to authorize the Board of Regents to contract for the design, renovation of, and addition to the National Music Museum in Vermillion and to make an appropriation therefor.
House Bill 1065, having received a second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Senator Tiedemann, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the body. There's some things when you come to the legislature, you learn a lot of new things. And this year, we had the opportunity in appropriations to learn about the National Music Museum at the University of South Dakota. This was founded in 1973. It's a center for the study of history of musical instruments. But they also have between 14,800 different instruments there that have been donated by the public. The museum, as I said, goes back a number of years and needs to be remodeled and renovated. Donations of $7.7 million plus another $1.5 million of HEF funds that will be used to do the restoration and renovation. The HVAC system is not in good shape. It's very difficult then to keep these instruments that have been donated and go back to the oldest cello known about in the world. This is at Vermillion, South Dakota, at the University of South Dakota. It's something that they also do a master's in the history of musical instruments, and that's the tie to the university and the museum. It's one of the few masters in the nation. Again, we learned a lot going through and hearing about this bill. But the space will be added on so they can store stuff as well as protect the instruments that have been collected over the years. About 10,000 people visit the museum each and every year. A lot of them are high school students that are involved in choral and band. Again, I want you to fix this up nice so that we can eventually move it to Brookings. No, I just urge the support of 1065.
We will just send the cowbells. Senator Rush.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also would stand in support of this bill. I assume that the Dakota Dome is a lot more familiar to most of you than the National Music Museum. But the National Music Museum may very well be the best museum of musical instruments in the world. They compete with museums in Berlin and Rome and London as far as the instruments that they have accumulated. We see people constantly in Vermillion who are there to visit the National Music Museum who can't believe that it is in South Dakota and who feel that it ought to be in New York City. If you're ever in the Vermillion area, try to visit that because it is a fantastic collection of instruments. Started out by Arnie Larson, who was a band instructor around South Dakota, collected these over many years of working in a number of different schools, I think at one time in Brookings, but I don't know that for sure on that. But he collected this, and since then, since they created the museum itself in 1973, they've accumulated a number of fantastic donors from all over the country who have helped them to accumulate world-class instruments, including 3 violins that Stradivarius violins, as I recall hearing when I'm there. The museum is located in what was the library when I was a student there, and clearly needs a significant additions and work on that to improve it and to make sure that we continue to have the best music instrument museum in the country. There are no general funds needed for this. Most of it's going to be paid for by donors that they have already lined up. So I would appreciate your support for this.
Thank you, sir. Further remarks? Senator Colbeck, good afternoon again, sir.
This is a question for my good senator friend from Brookings, South Dakota.
State your question.
Will the Pride of Dakota be able to perform in that building.
Senator Tiedemann, do you care to answer the question?
Mr. President, and thank you for the question. I don't think presently that building is big enough for the Pride to get in there. Thank you.
That's true. That's why you're expanding it. Further remarks? Hearing none, the question before the Senate is final passage of House Bill 1065 requires a 2/3 majority vote for passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Boland. Kamak. Cronin. Kurd. Ewing. Frerichs. Greenfield. Haverly. Heinert. Jensen. Kennedy. Killer. Klum. Kolbeck. Langer. Maher. Monroe. Nelson. Elson. Did you say nay? Okay. Nesseba. Netherton. Norstrup. Otten. Partridge. Peters. Rush. Russell. Soholt. Solano. Stalzer. Sutton. Tapio. Tiedemann. White. Wick. Youngberg. Solano. Mr. President, there are 33 yeas and 2 nays.
House Bill 1065, having received a 2/3 majority vote for passage, is hereby declared passed. Any title questions? Titles approved then. Last bill.
House Bill 1071, an act to authorize the relocation of the School for the Blind and the Visually Impaired and the transfer of its existing real estate and facilities to Northern State University, to authorize actions necessary to accomplish that relocation and transfer, to protect the permanent endowment trust through exchanges of real estate and facilities, and to appropriate funds and to declare an emergency.
Thank you. House Bill 1071, having received a second reading, is up for consideration and final passage. Senator Cronin, you are going to be exhausted.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think Boots summed it up pretty well, so if there's not any questions, I think we'll just proceed. For what the title explains, I'll quick run through just a few of the sections. I provided a handout that kind of helps work this land transfer to make it all happen. Section 1 authorizes the relocation of the School for the Blind and the transfers of jurisdiction over the current residence hall named Jurdy Hall and the current campus of the School for the Blind. Section 2 provides a rationale for the land exchanges and states the legal descriptions and appraised values of the property to be exchanged. In Section 3, that's where you'll see on your handout where this is the first exchange of land. It'll transfer land from Jurdy Hall, which is in the State University Trust, into non-trust land. And it will transfer the Wolves Memorial Suite from non-trust land to State University Trust land. This exchange would take effect as soon as the bill becomes law, so that the exchange, or so that the South Dakota School for the Blind facility can be constructed. The value of this new construction will accrue to the Jurdy Hall land while still under NSU control, but once the land is no longer subject to the trust obligation. That way, the enhanced value can offset and make money for the School for the Blind's trust. Section 4 authorizes the demolition of Jurdy Hall and then, in turn, the construction of the School for the Blind on that property. Finally, Section 5 authorizes a second exchange, which transfers the new School for the Blind facility land, former site of Jurdy Hall, from non-trust into the South Dakota School for the Blind Trust. And the transfers the current School for the Blind facility from where it sits today, from their trust into non-trust land. And then Section 6 will authorize the final part that I would talk about, authorizes the demolition of the School for the Blind after the new school's built. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Very well done. Senator Greenfield.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. I rise and I want to give full-throated support to this issue, but I want to also note that I've heard the concerns of at least one person, a person I've known who's been served by the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired for a number of years. And with this new opportunity also comes some, I guess, in this person's mind, trepidation. They're going to be entering a whole new world. And that does pose a little risk of the unknown. And so while the old facility is familiar, it is antiquated, and certainly new opportunities can be given to the people in the new building. But I do want to empathize with those who have come to know the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired for a number of years. They've called it home, they've been served by it, and I do recognize their concern. But this is certainly a worthy project, worth our, hopefully, unanimous support, Senator Maher. And again, I would very much encourage your support here on the floor today. But I did want to give voice to at least one of the people who has shared that concern with me. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body.
Thank you, sir. Senator Northrup, good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many times in South Dakota, we have well-kept secrets. For example, the museum that was talked about earlier today. Well, there's another well-kept secret in Aberdeen, and that is the partnership between Northern State and the School for the Visually Impaired. Many years ago, the legislature built that school right next to Northern, and that wasn't done by accident. That was a plan and a purpose. And what that purpose is there are students at Northern that are getting educated in terms of how to help people that are visually impaired. And it's a win-win situation in that the students benefit as the students come across the street from Northern, and the students benefit, the young people at the School for the Visually Impaired also benefit from that. Great working partnership, in my opinion, one of the best places in the United States to get the education in terms of the visually impaired. The other thing I want to talk about, after having bragged up the quality of the program, and that quality is obviously going to improve as we build a new building to meet the needs of the visually impaired. But also to mention that the donors need to be thanked. The School for the Blind and the Visually Impaired is very much, it's under the Board of Regents, which means it's a state-run function. So this building that is being built is built by local donors on behalf of the taxpayers of South Dakota. So it's a burden that is being removed from the taxpayers of South Dakota and is being taken up by the donors. I just want to take time to thank those generous people that have been successful in life, and we appreciate that and we thank them for that, and they have taken their time and resources and their money and donated it to make Northern and the South Dakota School for the Blind and the Visually Impaired a better place. And we've seen a lot of generosity in our state, and many things, and we just want to thank all those donors. The other thing I would mention, and this is a little bit off topic, but it's okay to do, I believe. As some of you know, my business involves go-karts. And some of our customers over the past 20 years has been the School for the Blind and the Visually Impaired, and we always appreciate when they come out to Thunder Road and enjoy our attraction. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. So we're advertising amusement parks and books today. Anybody else wish to advertise before we vote? Okay. Senator Partridge, yes. Okay. I'd like to be agnostic, so we'll move on. Further remarks? Hearing none, the question before the Senate is final passage of House Bill 1071. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Senator Boland. Aye. Mack. Aye. Cronin. Aye. Kurd. Aye. Ewing. Aye. Frerichs. Aye. Greenfield. Aye. Haverly. Aye. Heinert. Aye. Jensen. Aye. Kennedy. Aye. Killer. Aye. Klum, Colbeck, Langer, Maher, Monroe. Was that aye? Nelson? Nesseba? Netherton? Norstrup? Otten? Partridge? Peters?
Aye.
Rush? Russell? Sohold? Solano? Stalzer? Sutton? Tapio? Tiedemann? White? Wick? Youngberg? Mr. President, there are 34 yeas, 1 nay.
House Bill 1071, having received a 2/3 majority vote for passage, is hereby declared passed. I'll approve the title because it's the longest one we've had. Okay, announcements. Senator Wick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Joint Committee on Appropriations will be meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll be hearing bills. Senate Appropriations will meet at 10 a.m., both in room 362.
Very good. Senator Kamak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Ag and Natural Resources will be meeting this evening at 7 p.m. Considering Senate Bill 199, which has to do with non-meandered waters. We would welcome everyone. Excuse me, 6:30. I'm sorry, 6:30 this evening and 4:14.
6:30 this evening, Central Standard Time. Okay. Senator Frerichs, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Some of you maybe have noticed in the news, but the president with the Federal Reserve over in Minneapolis will be speaking, or there'll be a town hall tomorrow morning. And if you have time, I think it starts at 8 a.m. There's a registration online, but he's also meeting with others, I think, throughout the day tomorrow, but simply would just encourage attendance with the President Kashkari.
Senator Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commerce Energy, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Senator Kamak, you had a follow-up.
Yes, I wanted to mention there is no meeting then on Thursday for Senate Ag.
Thank you. Senator Boland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Ed tomorrow, 7:45. We've got 3 bills up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Senator Russell.
Senate Judiciary, 8 a.m. tomorrow.
8 a.m. Very good. Anything else? For those of you that don't have those meetings, I wanted to apprise you that they give me the list because I attend on behalf of the governor and me for the business plan summaries. Let me tell you, not the names, but the areas where they represent in the event that you wish to be in attendance at the bankers celebration. There's no dinner. There's heavy hors d'oeuvres, as there have been in the past, and then the presentation of the awards is at 6:30. Sully Buttes High School, Burke High School, young couple of folks there, Sanborn Central, Cheyenne Eagle Butte, Madison High School, young man there, and then from the Northern Black Hills and Belle Fourche area. So if that could tip you to be there, that'd be great. It's quite an amazing thing. So hearing no further announcements, we'll take motion to adjourn, ma'am.
Senator Wick moves that the Senate do now adjourn.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. You can't vote on either side of this issue anymore, Youngberg. We're out.